The phone rang just as the sun was beginning to set behind the neighborhood houses. My son's voice, David Brooks, came through the line cold and clipped. The kind of tone he used when he had already made up his mind. "Mom, don't come this year. Christmas dinner is just for Vanessa's family." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Christmas Eve was only days away, and the son I had raised alone for 42 years had just told me, without hesitation, that I wasn't welcome. His words cut through me sharper than any winter wind. "What do you mean, just Vanessa's family?" I asked. But deep inside, I already knew the truth. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa Brooks, had been working toward this for months. I had seen the way she leaned into David at gatherings, whispering in his ear like she was adjusting the settings on a toy she owned. And those looks she gave me, condescending, dismissive, like I was a worn-out decoration that didn't match her new life. "Oh, Mom, Vanessa just wants to do something special for Noah this year," David said, trying to sound reasonable, as if cruelty softened with gentleness became anything less than cruelty. Noah, my 8-year-old grandson. The boy who still ran into my arms every time he saw me. The boy who begged me for bedtime stories and said he wanted to grow up to be smart like Grandma. My heart cracked in places I didn't know still existed. And yet, strangely, a smile curved on my lips. A quiet, steady smile, one David didn't know well enough to fear yet. "That's fine, sweetheart," I said, my voice surprisingly gentle. He hesitated. "Really? You're not upset?" His confusion was almost insulting, almost as if he expected me to beg. "No, honey, enjoy yourselves," I said, and ended the call with a calmness I hadn't felt in a very long time. What my son didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that just 3 days earlier, I had signed the contract for a beachfront mansion worth $15 million in Palm Beach, Florida, a house I had quietly followed for months, waiting for the right moment to step into the life I had built in silence. To them, I was the poor, dependent grandma, living in a tiny apartment, showing up to family gatherings in the same moss green dress for 3 years straight. To them, I was harmless, invisible, and safe to underestimate. But I was managing investments they couldn't imagine in their wildest dreams. For years, I swallowed my pride, enduring Vanessa's barbed comments about people who shop with coupons. Enduring how she gently shoved me to the fringes of family photos. How she sat me at the far end of the table where no one really talked. I remembered her once telling a friend on the phone, "Older people don't always understand social cues." I had pretended not to hear. But something shifted in me that night. Maybe it was the chill in David's voice, the shameless ease with which he discarded me. Maybe it was realizing that my own son preferred to humiliate his mother over the phone rather than face her. Or maybe it was simply time I stopped being the silent victim in my own family. As I made coffee that evening, the gold key ring to the new mansion lay on the table, gleaming under the kitchen light like a quiet promise. That mansion had 8 ensuite bedrooms, an infinity pool facing the ocean, soaring ceilings with exposed beams, and floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to a private beach, a place that looked nothing like the life they thought I lived. While they planned a small, exclusive dinner, I would prepare the most extraordinary Christmas my family had ever seen. That night, lying in bed, I thought about every humiliation I had swallowed over the years. The birthdays I was accidentally not invited to. The grocery money David handed me like pocket change. The school performances where Vanessa hinted I didn't need to come because other grandmothers dressed better. Small cruelties. Drip by drip. Until they became poison. But that night, something inside me rose, not rage, but clarity. Weak, invisible Eleanor died with that phone call. The woman who remained was someone they had never truly known. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I got dressed, put on the same green dress they liked to mock, and drove to David and Vanessa's home in their quiet, gated community, a house I had helped them pay for 5 years ago when David lost his job. I rang the bell. Vanessa opened the door with a look of thinly veiled annoyance, the kind she reserved for telemarketers and unexpected deliveries. "Mrs. Brooks, we weren't expecting you," she said, blocking the doorway like my presence might dirty her floors. "Hello, Vanessa. I came to see Noah, and since I'm here, we should talk about Christmas." She stepped aside with forced politeness, shooting David a sharp glance behind her, a silent command for him to handle me. David appeared moments later, unable to look me in the eye. "Mom, we already talked. We just want to do things differently this year." Before I could respond, Noah burst out of his room, joy lighting up his whole face. "Grandma." But Vanessa's hand landed on his shoulder before he reached me. "Noah, go finish your homework. The adults are talking." His smile faded instantly. The boy shuffled away, glancing back with soft apology in his eyes. I sat on the sofa, the same one I bought them as a housewarming gift, and watched Vanessa take her place across from me with the posture of a queen expecting petitioners. "I hope you understand this isn't personal," she began, voice dripping with sugar. "My family just has very particular Christmas traditions." Her parents were from France. She reminded me. They used fine china and imported caviar. They valued elegance. And I, according to the way her eyes swept over my dress, did not fit that picture. And then came the words that changed everything. "You no longer match our lifestyle." Something inside me snapped free. Not in anger, but in finality. "I understand perfectly," I said softly. And I did. Everything was about to change. David walked me to the door with a strained, uneasy look, the kind a person wears when they know they have crossed a line but still lacks the courage to step back over it. "Mom, please don't take this personally," he murmured. "It's just easier this way." "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "Nothing personal at all." The lie rolled off my tongue with surprising ease. As I stepped into the cold December air, the weight of the mansion's gold key ring inside my coat pocket felt heavier than ever, like a promise whispering. They have no idea who they've dismissed. That night, in my small apartment, the one they assumed defined my worth, I locked the door, walked into my bedroom, and opened the wardrobe. Behind the dresses, behind the sweaters folded neatly on shelves, was a small concealed safe. My hands did not tremble as I spun the dial. I had waited 15 years for this moment. Inside lay the truth my family had never seen. Investment certificates, portfolio statements, property deeds, documents that represented a lifetime of quiet strategy and discipline. When my husband, Robert, passed away 15 years ago, everyone assumed I was left with nothing. They offered condolences laced with pity, whispering about how poor Eleanor would have to downsize and survive on a small Social Security check. What they never knew, not even David, was that Robert had been far wiser and far more strategic than anyone ever imagined. For over 20 years, he had invested quietly in tech stocks that friends once laughed at. He purchased land in out-of-the-way areas that people thought were worthless. Today, those worthless plots were part of multi-million-dollar developments. The modest investment account he left me, just under $5 million, had multiplied itself again and again through compound interest and careful guidance from my financial advisor, Tom Whitman. That $5 million had grown into more than $80 million, and not a soul in my family knew. Why did I hide it? Grief, at first, then clarity, and then observation. I wanted to know who loved me as a human being, not as a wallet. I wanted to see who would show up for me when they thought I had nothing. And oh, how clearly they showed me. The phone call from David, the disdain in Vanessa's eyes, the humiliations I had endured in silence, each one was an answer. And now I had everything I needed. The next morning, I made a decision. A quiet, powerful decision. I would not confront them with yelling. I would not demand respect. I would not beg for inclusion. No. I would create my own Christmas. A Christmas they would never forget and never overcome. The first call I made that morning was to my sister, Patricia "Pat" Reynolds, who lived 3 states away. Pat and I had always been close, but she hadn't visited in 2 years, not after Vanessa humiliated her publicly at Thanksgiving. "Pat, it's Eleanor," I said. Eleanor, I wasn't expecting your call. Is everything okay? Better than okay, I smiled. Do you have plans for Christmas? Well, Pat hesitated. After last year, I wasn't planning on going anywhere. Vanessa made it very clear she preferred immediate family only. Forget Vanessa, I said warmly. You're coming to my home this year. Your home? She replied. The apartment? No, Pat. I read her the Palm Beach address. She gasped. Eleanor, that's one of the most expensive strips of beachfront. Did you read it right? I read it perfectly. There was a long silence on the other end. Eleanor, what on earth have you been hiding? Come for Christmas, I told her softly. I'll explain everything then. Next, I called my cousin, Frank Dalton, a man with calloused hands and the biggest heart in the world, someone Vanessa had treated like a nuisance because he worked as a mechanic. Frank, how do you feel about spending Christmas with me this year? Are you okay, Eleanor? I just got a message saying David canceled Christmas dinner altogether. Said it was your request. I let out a small, amused breath. So David used my name to exclude the rest of the family. Interesting. Are you really okay? He asked again. Concerned. Frank, I said, smiling. I'm better than ever. Bring your entire family. I have a surprise for all of you. I gave him the address. He paused, choked, then whispered, Eleanor, celebrities live there. Good, I replied. Then you'll feel right at home. One by one, I called everyone who had ever been silently pushed out. Aunts, uncles, cousins, old neighbors who'd helped me when Robert died. Family friends who had stopped receiving invitations once Vanessa took over the holiday planning. Everyone said yes. Not reluctantly. Not politely. But joyfully. Because they loved me, not for appearance, money, or status, but because I had always been there for them. 35 guests confirmed within 12 hours. 35 hearts that wanted to share Christmas with me. And not one of those hearts belonged to David or Vanessa. In the days that followed, I kept my routine deliberately unchanged. I still shopped next to retirees clipping coupons. I still wore my simple clothes. I still drove my old sedan. David and Vanessa had no idea that every evening after the poor widow finished grocery shopping, she slipped into her car and drove straight to a $15 million mansion on the ocean to oversee preparations for the most spectacular Christmas the Brooks family had ever seen. The mansion came alive with the scent of fresh pine and white orchids. Thousands of warm golden lights wrapped around the palm trees. The infinity pool mirrored the December sky. I oversaw each detail with Claire Monroe, the interior designer, who transformed the place into a scene out of a winter fairy tale. Meanwhile, David called twice. He sounded uncertain, maybe guilty. Mom, are you okay? You sounded so calm the other day. I'm wonderful, sweetheart, I said sincerely. Enjoy your very refined European dinner. And then Vanessa called. Mrs. Brooks, I hope you didn't take the other day too seriously. She said sweetly. I only wanted to make sure we all understood what's best for the family. Thank you, Vanessa, I replied. You opened my eyes. She sighed in relief. Good, I knew you'd be mature about it. She had no idea. None of them had any idea. On Christmas Eve morning, I woke up early, brewed a cup of dark roast coffee, and drove to the mansion for the final walkthrough. The December light shimmered along the ocean, washing the private shoreline in soft gold. It felt like waking up inside a dream, except this time. The dream was mine, built by my own hands. My patience, my silence. Chef Philip and his culinary team were already in the gourmet kitchen, arranging ingredients with the precision of surgeons. The menu was nothing like the foie gras and imported caviar Vanessa liked to boast about. This was cuisine crafted by a chef who had spent years in a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York. Fresh Maine lobster chilled on a bed of shaved ice. Norwegian salmon cured to perfection. Beluga caviar that could make a grown man cry. Even the aroma drifting out of the oven, roasted duck with orange glaze, felt like a celebration of vindication. Everything gleamed. The great room, with its 20-foot ceilings and marble fireplace, looked straight out onto the ocean where the waves rolled in like applause. Claire Monroe had outdone herself. The 13-foot Christmas tree sparkled with Austrian crystal ornaments. The chandelier above the dining table cast a soft glow over each place setting, fine bone china rimmed with gold. Crystal stemware, perfectly folded napkins adorned with white orchids. By early afternoon, the guests began to arrive. The first car to pull up was a taxi carrying my sister, Patricia, Pat Reynolds. As the driver stopped at the gate, Pat simply stared, unable to get out at first. When she stepped onto the stone path, her eyes were wide with disbelief. "Eleanor, oh my God. Are you in trouble? Did someone give you this place? Is this a movie set?" I laughed for the first time that day. A warm, genuine laugh. "Come inside, Pat. Let me show you everything." She clutched my arm as we walked into the foyer. Each room she entered pulled another gasp from her. "How is this possible?" she whispered. We stood on the veranda overlooking the ocean, a gentle breeze brushing past us. "Remember when Robert died 15 years ago?" I asked. She nodded. "Well, turns out he was better with money than any of us knew." I told her everything: Robert's early tech investments, the land purchases that became gold mines, the $5 million that grew quietly into more than 80. Pat listened as if she were hearing a fairy tale, except her eyes kept filling with tears. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she finally asked. "Because I needed to know who would love me even when they thought I had nothing." An hour later, Frank Dalton arrived with his entire family. His 3 kids burst into the garden, phones out, taking pictures in awe. His wife kept saying, "This can't be real, Eleanor. This place looks like a magazine." Frank pulled me aside, emotion thick in his voice. "You should have told us. We would have been here for you the whole time." "You were here for me," I said gently. "That's why you're here tonight." As more guests poured in, neighbors who had treated me like family when I was grieving, cousins who had been pushed aside by David and Vanessa's new standards, the mansion filled with warmth. Laughter rose beneath the vaulted ceilings. Glasses clinked on the veranda. Kids played under the golden lights that reflected off the pool. Everyone belonged. Everyone was wanted. Everyone was family. The exact opposite of what Vanessa had built. By sunset, the whole estate looked like a Christmas fairy tale. Claire had arranged lanterns along the garden path, and as the sky turned rose gold, the lights shimmered like fireflies celebrating alongside us. Linda Harrington, my oldest friend and the director of a major charity foundation, arrived with a surprise: a professional photographer. "I figured you'd want to remember tonight," she said with a mischievous smile, "and maybe share a bit of it." The photographer began shooting immediately. Laughter by the pool. The glow of the chandelier reflecting in champagne glasses. The ocean sparkling behind us. Each image was a message, a declaration, a truth the world never knew. And then my phone began to vibrate. Once. Twice. 3 times. "David." I ignored the first call. And the second. When he called the 3rd time, I silenced the phone and placed it face down on the table. Pat raised an eyebrow. "He's panicking." "Let him," I said. As we moved to the veranda for appetizers, my phone buzzed again. 9 calls now. Then 12. Then 15. The message notifications stacked like falling dominoes. "Mom, where are you? Are you safe? Why aren't you home? Did you go somewhere? Please call me back. Vanessa's upset. Mom, we're worried." Worried. The word tasted almost sweet. Still, I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, with the ocean breeze brushing past us, I opened my phone to post the first photo of the night, a wide shot of the mansion glowing against the twilight sky. Caption: "Christmas with the family who truly loves me. Grateful." Within minutes, comments began flooding in. Distant cousins, old coworkers, childhood neighbors. Everyone in awe. I posted a second picture, the grand dining table filled with people who had chosen to be with me. Who valued me, who had never made me feel less than. Caption: "Family reunited, 35 hearts beating as one." My notifications exploded. And David called again. 17 missed calls. Then 21. Then 23. Vanessa's messages followed. Mrs. Brooks? Where are you? People keep calling us saying they saw photos of you in some mansion. Is this a joke? Please answer. But I didn't. Dessert arrived, chocolate mousse so airy it melted like a secret on the tongue. Wine flowed. Music drifted through the great room. The photographer captured it all. Frank leaned toward me. Eleanor, the look on David's face right now. I'd pay money to see it. I smiled for the first time since the phone call that started it all. He'll see soon enough, I said softly. They both will. And as fireworks exploded above the ocean at midnight, casting shimmering light across the water, my phone rang again. Noah. My heart tightened. Grandma, where are you? He asked in a small voice. I miss you. Before I could answer, another call came in, from David. And I knew the moment of reckoning was approaching. But not tonight. Tonight was for joy. For truth. For reclaiming everything I lost. Tonight was mine. The fireworks painted the sky in streaks of silver and gold, scattering across the ocean like falling stars. 35 people stood with me on the veranda, glasses raised, laughter echoing into the night. The photographer captured the moment, the entire group bathed in firework glow. Everyone smiling with a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in ages. My phone buzzed again. This time, I stepped aside and checked the screen. 43 missed calls from David. 26 from Vanessa. And several from an unknown number, which I soon realized belonged to Noah's best friend's family. I ignored them all. Tonight was too beautiful, too precious, too hard-earned to let panic from those who had pushed me aside cloud it. But when the unknown number called again, I answered. Grandma? Noah's voice trembled. Why aren't you here? Dad is mad, and Mom keeps crying. My heart tightened. No matter how complicated adults made things, a child's love remained pure. I miss you too, sweetheart, I whispered, but sometimes adults make decisions that have consequences. Your parents chose to have Christmas without me. But I didn't choose that, he said, voice cracking. I had to close my eyes for a moment. Noah, listen to me, you did nothing wrong, and I love you very, very much. Before he could say more, I heard Vanessa in the background. Noah, give me that phone right now. The line went dead. The sound of waves filled the silence around me. I steadied myself, then returned to the veranda where Pat and Frank were waiting. You okay? Frank asked gently. I'm fine, I said. Tonight isn't about them. The music picked up again. Guests danced beneath the string lights draped along the garden path. The photographer shot more candid moments, kids playing tag on the lawn. Glasses clinking, laughter floating across the pool. Near midnight, Claire approached me with her tablet in hand. Eleanor, she said, eyes gleaming, you need to see this. She turned the screen around. My photos, every one of them, were blowing up online. Hundreds of comments, hundreds of shares, relatives I hadn't heard from in years asking how on earth I was living in such a place. Your story is spreading, Claire said. This is going to ripple through every corner of your family. I looked out at the guests, the people who had loved me without conditions, and a slow satisfaction warmed my chest. Good, I said softly, let the truth ripple. The party continued until nearly 2 in the morning. Eventually, the guests drifted out, offering hugs, promising to come back soon, telling me how unforgettable the night had been. When the last car disappeared down the driveway, I walked through the quiet mansion, admiring the way the moonlight shimmered against the marble floors. Then, exhausted but content, I fell asleep in the mansion's primary bedroom, the ocean waves humming like a lullaby. Christmas morning arrived with sunlight spilling across the ocean through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled of salt and citrus from the fresh flowers Claire had arranged the night before. Pat joined me on the veranda for breakfast, croissants, fresh berries, and eggs Benedict plated so beautifully it felt like something from a high-end magazine. Well, she said, sipping her coffee, yesterday was the best Christmas of my life. Mine too, I admitted. Before I could say more, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered. Mrs. Brooks? This is No's friend's mom. Sorry to call so early, but David and Vanessa came to our house at 7 a.m. They're asking if we've seen you. I raised an eyebrow. How interesting. They looked frantic. She continued, we saw your photos on Facebook. That house is incredible, but they seem confused. Worried. Tell them I'm perfectly fine. I said calmly. And when I want to talk, I'll reach out. 5 more calls followed from various people, an old neighbor, a distant cousin, even No's dentist, each explaining that David and Vanessa were asking around. Desperate to find me. Finally, I opened my phone. Dozens upon dozens of messages waited. David. Mom, what is going on? Please just tell us you're safe. Where did you take these photos? Whose house is that? Please call me. We're so worried. Vanessa's tone was more frantic, less polished than usual. Mrs. Brooks, I don't understand why you're doing this. Why didn't you ever tell us you had money? Please call us back. People are asking questions. This is serious. I set the phone down and took another sip of coffee. It wasn't my job to calm the storm they created. Around noon, Pat and I finished breakfast. We were reviewing the guest list for a possible New Year gathering when the security system chimed. A vehicle had arrived at the gate. A sleek BMW pulled up, the one David was so proud of. The doors flew open before the engine even stopped. David was still in yesterday's clothes. Hair disheveled, face pale. Vanessa looked even worse, mascara smudged. Hair a mess. Her usual poise completely gone. They stared up at the mansion as if it were a hallucination. Their wide eyes took in the massive entryway, the marble fountain, the towering windows. Their world had tilted. Good. David approached the intercom and pressed the button. Mom, I know you're in there. His voice cracked. Please, we need to talk. I let them wait. 5 minutes. Long enough for them to feel the weight of what they'd done. Long enough for me to savor the quiet power they had once tried to take from me. Finally, I pressed the button. Who is it? I asked calmly. Mom, it's David. I'm here with Vanessa. Please open the gate. We need an explanation. For what, dear? I asked. The house? The money? Or why I didn't tell you everything? Why would you hide this from us? He demanded. Have you been lying to us? I never lied, I said. I simply didn't tell you everything. There's a difference. Vanessa's voice cut in, strained and shaky. Could you please open the gate so we can talk like adults? I paused. Fine, I said, but answer one question first. They waited. Did you come here today because you truly wanted to see me, or because the photos made me interesting again? The silence that followed was heavier than the ocean itself. Mom, David whispered, please, just let us in. I pressed the button. The gate slid open. They walked up the stone path slowly, each step echoing with realization. By the time they reached the front door, they were no longer the ones in control. And for the first time in many years, I opened the door not as the poor widow they dismissed, but as the woman I truly was. Hello, David. Hello, Vanessa, I said softly. Welcome to my home. David and Vanessa stepped into the foyer like two people entering a museum filled with priceless artifacts they had no right to touch. Their eyes darted across the crystal chandelier hanging above them, the marble floors polished to a mirror-like sheen, the original artwork lining the walls. Every detail contradicted the image of me they had built in their minds, the fragile, frugal widow with nothing but coupons and hand-me-downs. I gestured toward the Italian leather sofa in the great room. Sit, I said softly. They obeyed immediately, something I had not seen from them in years. Vanessa perched on the edge of the cushion like it might explode beneath her. David's hands trembled on his knees. He was the first to speak. Mom, is this house really yours? Of course it is, I replied. I bought it a week ago. Paid in full. The color drained from David's face. Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came out. Paid in full? She finally whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, I said, and this is only one of several properties I own. Vanessa blinked hard, her breath uneven. I don't understand where you got that kind of money. Did you win the lottery? I almost laughed. The lottery? No, dear. This is far greater than a lottery win. I stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. The breeze fluttered the sheer curtains, carrying with it the scent of salt and something like justice. When your father died, I began, everyone assumed I was left with very little, including you, David, and I didn't correct that assumption, because I wanted to see what people's hearts revealed when they thought I had nothing to offer. David lowered his gaze. What you didn't know, I continued, was that your father was a brilliant investor. Long before tech became the empire it is today, he invested in companies that no one took seriously. He also bought land in areas people mocked, ugly, useless, empty. Those areas now host multi-million-dollar developments. Vanessa swallowed, her voice faint. But, how much? I turned to face them. Your father left me nearly $5 million in investments when he passed away. Over the last 15 years. With careful guidance from my advisor, Tom Whitman, that amount has grown to more than $80 million. The room was silent. Only the waves filled the background, steady and rhythmic, as if applauding the truth. David finally looked up. 80 million? Yes, sweetheart. He sat back in shock, his mouth slightly open. Vanessa looked as if she had forgotten how to breathe. And yet, I said, lowering my voice, you two treated me as though I were a burden, as though I were less. Vanessa immediately shook her head. Mrs. Brooks, I never. Vanessa, I interrupted calmly, I'm not interested in excuses. This isn't about one rude comment or one bad day. This is about 5 years of condescension. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Maybe I said things I shouldn't have. You told me the gifts I bought Noah were cheap. You suggested I skip his school recital because the other grandmothers dress better. You rolled your eyes at my clothes, my food, my presents. I paused, letting the weight of each memory settle. And 2 days ago, you told me I wasn't refined enough to sit at your precious Christmas dinner table. David turned toward Vanessa sharply. You said what? Vanessa looked away, jaw tight. I may have been blunt. Blunt? I repeated. You meant every word, and you enjoyed saying them. Vanessa finally broke. You don't understand, Mrs. Brooks. My parents have high standards. They expect a certain level. I didn't want them judging us because I'm not good enough for them? I finished for her. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said those things. David reached toward me, desperate. Mom, I should have stopped it. I should have stood up for you. I held his gaze. Yes, you should have, but you didn't. He flinched. I walked closer, choosing my words with care. For 15 years, I waited for the son I raised, my only child, to see me as someone worthy of respect. Not just someone who fills space at a dinner table. But instead, I endured a slow, steady drip of disrespect, and the one person who should have protected me let it happen. David's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mom, I was blind, I was stupid. Maybe, I said gently, but sorry is not a magic eraser. Vanessa looked up, trembling. Mrs. Brooks, do you hate us? No, I answered truthfully. Hatred is too small for what I've lived through. What I feel is disappointment. Deep, bone-deep disappointment. David bowed his head, tears gathering in his eyes. I let the silence stretch. Because silence has a power they were only beginning to understand. Finally, I spoke again, softer this time. You came here today, not because you suddenly value me, but because you realized I am not the poor, powerless woman you thought I was. If you saw these photos and believed I was renting some fancy venue, would you have come at all? Neither of them answered. They didn't have to. I could see the truth on their faces. Mom, David whispered, is there anything we can do to fix this? There is, I said, but actions will matter far more than apologies. Vanessa's voice was barely audible. What do we have to do? I stepped closer, the ocean wind brushing against my back as if urging me forward. You must learn, I said slowly, that true refinement has nothing to do with money. or glassware, or European dinners. Real elegance lies in how you treat people who you think have nothing to offer you. Vanessa closed her eyes, tears falling freely. And David, I added, you must decide what kind of son you want to be. Not in words, in behavior. He wiped his face. I want to be better. Mom, I will be better. We'll see, I said softly. The conversation hung in the air, not resolved. Not healed, but finally honest. For the first time in many years, they were seeing me. Not the version of me they constructed. Not the invisible woman in the moss green dress. But Eleanor. The woman they never truly knew. And the reckoning had only just begun. After that first raw confrontation, the three of us stood suspended in a silence thick enough to touch. The ocean's slow rhythm filled the room through the open glass doors. A reminder that the world outside moved calmly no matter how turbulent our hearts were. David finally spoke. Mom, I don't recognize myself anymore. I don't know when I stopped valuing you. I don't know when I let other people's opinions decide how I behaved toward my own mother. His voice cracked. That fragile tone I remembered from when he was a boy who scraped his knee and didn't want to cry. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was the wreckage of years. David, I said gently, you tolerated disrespect because it was easier than confronting it. He nodded, breaking. I know, and I let Vanessa influence decisions about you, without thinking for myself. Vanessa swallowed hard. I shouldn't have acted like I owned this family. I've been insecure. I wanted to impress my parents, my friends, and I took that out on you. I studied her face, the smeared mascara, the trembling chin. This wasn't the polished, perfectly curated Vanessa who dictated every detail of family gatherings. This was a woman unraveling under the weight of her own arrogance. Vanessa, I said slowly, if insecurity leads someone to humiliate those who never harmed them, then the insecurity is not an excuse. It's a warning. She nodded through her tears. I turned back to David. In all these years, was there ever a moment when you truly saw me as a person, not just the role of mom you could push to the margin? He closed his eyes. I did when I was younger. When I needed you. When you worked double shifts so I could stay in baseball. When you sat with me all night senior year when I had that panic attack about college. When I asked, you were there, always. And when you didn't ask, I said quietly, I was still there. He opened his eyes, wet with regret. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway, because I can't undo what I've done if you shut me out completely. I breathed in slowly, tasting the salt in the air. David, forgiveness isn't something you get because you're sorry. Forgiveness is something you rebuild. Over time, through actions. He nodded hard, desperate. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Good, I said, because this family isn't broken beyond repair, not yet. But the repair must begin with accountability. Vanessa wiped her sleeve under her eyes. What do we have to do? I walked across the room and stood near the curved staircase, making them turn and face me fully. First, I said, understand this: I am not the fragile widow you dismissed for years. This, I gestured around the massive home, is who I truly am. A woman who built a life in silence while the world underestimated her. They both stared, absorbing that. Second, I continued, you will never again treat me, or anyone else, as though their worth is based on money or appearance. Real refinement comes from grace. Not from dinner menus or imported champagne. David nodded instantly. Vanessa followed a moment later. Slower, but sincere. And third, I said, Noah must grow up knowing the truth that his grandmother is someone he can be proud of, not someone hidden away because she didn't fit your curated image. At the mention of Noah, David's expression softened painfully. He misses you so much. He said quietly. He asks for you every night. A fissure opened in my chest. The good kind, the kind that allowed light to filter through. He's a child, I whispered. He shouldn't suffer for your mistakes. David exhaled shakily. I know, that's why I want to do this right. I walked to the veranda, letting the ocean breeze cool the warmth rising in my cheeks. There's one more thing, I added. They waited, still seated, still humbled. This mansion isn't just for me. I bought it with the intention of passing part of it down to Noah. One day, when he becomes a man who treats people with kindness and respect, he will inherit a portion of this estate. David froze. You'd still leave him something after everything? I'm not punishing Noah, I said simply. He's innocent, but he will inherit only if he grows up learning the lesson neither of you understood until now. Vanessa looked stunned, then quietly grateful. Mrs. Brooks, that's incredibly generous. It's not generosity, I corrected. It's legacy. A legacy built on dignity. David wiped his face again, struggling to compose himself. Mom, would you be open to seeing Noah? He's been asking for you since last night. Begging. Really? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I needed the terms clear. Yes, I said, but when Noah comes here, he will meet the real me, not the version you both constructed, not the woman you pushed aside at dinner tables. He will meet Eleanor, the woman who built an empire out of patience, grief, and strategy. David nodded firmly. I want him to meet her. I want him to know who you really are. And, I added quietly, you will teach him that older people are not burdens. That respect is not optional. That love is not conditional on status or appearances. David's voice softened, humbled. I promise. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice trembling. I promise too. I'm going to therapy. I need help understanding why I behaved the way I did. I don't want to be that woman anymore. I looked at her for a long moment. For the first time, I believed she meant it. David stepped closer, not touching me, but standing with the posture of a son who finally understood the fragility of the bridge he'd almost burned. There's still hope for us. Mom, he whispered. Yes, I said, but hope requires work, and consistency. Outside, the waves continued their endless motion, steady, cleansing, patient. Just like healing. And for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the only one willing to try. The following morning, sunlight spilled across the veranda like warm honey, lighting up the ocean in brilliant shades of blue. For the first time in years, I woke up feeling at peace, not the kind of peace that comes from quiet rooms or soft blankets, but the peace of finally standing in my own truth. Pat was already in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured fresh coffee. When she looked up, she smiled, the kind of smile sisters reserve for moments that feel like victory. So, she said, handing me a cup, what's the plan today, Eleanor? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Today? I breathed. Let them figure out their next move. She chuckled. I'm guessing they didn't sleep last night. No, I said, but that's not my burden anymore. We sat on the veranda, enjoying breakfast as the waves brushed gently against the sand. I felt lighter, as if a weight I'd carried for 15 long years had finally dissolved. But the day was only beginning. Around midday, my phone rang again. This time, it was a call I recognized, David. I didn't pick up. A text came through immediately. Mom, can I come alone? Just me, please. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I replied with 2 words. Come by. 20 minutes later, the gate camera lit up with the image of my son, alone. Clutching a coffee cup, his expression stripped of pride. He wore jeans and a plain sweatshirt, a far cry from the curated image Vanessa encouraged. When I opened the door, he didn't step inside immediately. Mom, he said softly, thank you for letting me come. Come in, David. He stepped into the foyer like it was sacred ground. His eyes still darted around, not in envy, but in disbelief that his mother had lived like this in silence. I led him out to the veranda overlooking the ocean. The breeze was calm today, almost tender. Would you like coffee? I asked. Yes, he said, sitting carefully as though afraid to disturb the moment. Please. When I handed him the cup, he held it with both hands, as if anchoring himself. Mom, he began, voice unsteady. I didn't sleep last night. I replayed every moment I ignored you. Every moment I let Vanessa speak for us. Every time I didn't stand up for you. He paused, swallowing hard. Do you think, in these last 15 years, I ever made you feel valued? Even once? His vulnerability surprised me. Not because he had never cried before. David had always been a sensitive child, but because adulthood had buried that softness under layers of fear and pride. I took a slow breath. There were moments, I said, when you were younger, when you still needed me. But as you grew older, David, yes, I felt tolerated more than appreciated. Accepted out of obligation, not love. He closed his eyes. That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of waves filled the silence. David, I said gently, I can forgive mistakes, but you must understand where the wound lies. It wasn't just that you let Vanessa speak poorly of me. It was that you allowed yourself to believe I didn't matter. He rubbed his face, the truth striking him hard. I became someone I don't even like. He whispered, someone who forgot the woman who raised him. And now? I asked. Now, he said, straightening, I want to know the real you. He looked around the veranda, the infinity pool shimmering behind us. The manicured garden, the ocean stretching endlessly across the horizon. I want to know the woman who built all this. The woman I didn't bother to understand. The woman I should have been proud of. Something warm loosened in my chest. Progress, not forgiveness, but movement. And what about Vanessa? I asked. His jaw tightened. She's been crying since yesterday. She keeps saying she's the worst person alive. But I don't know if she's crying because she hurt you, or because she's afraid she lost access to everything she wanted. I appreciated his honesty more than he knew. Has she taken responsibility? I asked. She's trying, but the truth is, she has a lot of work to do. I nodded, not judging him but acknowledging reality. And Noah? I asked softly. At his name, something in David's face broke open. Mom, he keeps asking why his grandma disappeared. I told him adults make big mistakes sometimes. And when they do, they have to work hard to fix them. My breath caught. And what did he say to that? He said, Dad, then you better start working. I couldn't help but smile. That sounds like him. David looked out at the ocean, gathering courage. Mom, I want to earn back your trust. Not because of the money. I swear it's not that. Seeing how I treated you, it's like waking up and realizing you've been sleepwalking for years. Then wake up, I said softly, and stay awake. He nodded, absorbing the words. At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was Pat checking in. Do you need backup? I smiled. No, I told David, this is a conversation we needed. We talked for another hour, about his childhood. About the years after Robert died. About how loneliness had shaped both of us differently. He listened in a way he hadn't listened in years. And when he stood to leave, he hesitated. Mom, can I hug you? It was the first time he'd asked that since he was a teenager. Yes, David, I said, opening my arms, you can. He hugged me tightly, years of distance melting into the salt-scented breeze. When he pulled back, his eyes were red but hopeful. There's still a chance for us, he said. There is, I replied, but remember, hope requires action. And consistency. He nodded, determined. I'll show you, Mom. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed he might. 2 days passed after David's visit, 2 quiet days in which the ocean breeze moved like a gentle metronome, marking time as if the world had finally settled into the rhythm I had earned. Pat stayed with me, helping arrange small touches around the mansion and encouraging me with the kind of soft cheer only a sister can give. But on the 3rd day, the inevitable happened. Vanessa called. Her name flashing across my phone wasn't surprising. But the hesitation, 4 rings before I decided to answer, felt like a shift in who held the power now. When I picked up, her voice was choked. Mrs. Brooks, Eleanor, may I come to see you? Her tone lacked its usual coating of polished sweetness. No pretense, no arrogance, just uncertainty, and something that sounded like fear. Come by in an hour, I said. Exactly 60 minutes later, the gate camera flickered on. There she was. Vanessa Brooks, usually immaculate, hairstyled, makeup flawless, now stood outside in jeans and a simple coat. Her eyes were tired, shoulders drawn inward. She looked smaller, Somehow, as though she'd been stripped of the armor she wore like a second skin. When I opened the door, she didn't cross the threshold immediately. "Thank you for letting me come," she whispered. "Come in, Vanessa." She stepped inside slowly, her gaze trailing across the foyer with a different expression this time, less shock. More humility, almost reverence. "I brought something," she said, holding out a small paper bag. "It's nothing big, just muffins. I baked them myself." The gesture startled me. Vanessa never baked. She was the type of person who believed every baked good should come from a boutique French patisserie. "Thank you," I said, taking the warm bag gently. We sat on the veranda. The waves were calm today, a soft, rhythmic hush that contrasted the tension between us. For a long moment, Vanessa didn't speak. She twisted her fingers together, clearly struggling to find the right words. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "Eleanor, I'm in therapy. I started 2 days ago." I blinked, surprised. "I didn't expect that," I admitted. "I know," she said, voice trembling. "Neither did I. But the truth is, my behavior, the way I treated you, it comes from something ugly inside me. My therapist says I've been compensating for my own insecurities by controlling everything around me." She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her coat. "I've always tried to impress people. My parents, my friends, even strangers, and when I felt insecure or judged, I took it out on the people who were least likely to fight back." She swallowed, tears slipping freely now. "And you were the easiest target. You never argued, you never pushed back, you just accepted it." I let her words settle. The wind moved softly between us, carrying the smell of the ocean and the weight of truths long ignored. "Vanessa," I said, "understanding why you behaved badly doesn't excuse the behavior. But it does give a place to start." She nodded quickly. "I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness today. Not even this month. I want you to know I'm trying." She took a shaky breath. "When I saw those photos of your Christmas party, the people surrounding you, the love in that house, I realized I had spent years trying to create a perfect image of family when the real thing was right in front of me. I pushed away the one person Noah loves more than anyone." Her voice cracked again. "I failed you, and I failed him." I looked at her, not the polished, curated Vanessa, but the woman who had finally confronted her own reflection and found it lacking. "You have a long road ahead," I said gently, "but acknowledging the harm is the first step." She nodded. "I want to make things right, Eleanor. I want Noah to grow up knowing kindness, not judgment. I want him to see me become better than I have been." Her sincerity was real, raw, unpolished. And then, as if pulled by instinct, she asked the question that had been hanging unspoken between us. Would you consider seeing Noah today? He's been asking for you every morning." The moment she said his name, warmth spread through my chest. "Yes," I said softly, "I'll see him." Her shoulders sagged with relief. "I'll bring him right away. He's at home waiting." No more than 30 minutes later, the gate camera lit up again. This time, it was Noah. His small face pressed near the screen, brown hair tousled, eyes wide with hope. When I opened the door, he didn't hesitate, not for a second. He flung himself into my arms with such force that I almost stumbled. "Grandma," he cried, "where did you go? I've been looking for you everywhere." I held him tight, inhaling the familiar scent of sunshine and crayons and childhood innocence. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered into his hair. "I missed you too." He pulled back just enough to study my face. "Dad said adults make mistakes," he said earnestly, "but he said they're trying to fix it. Are you mad at them?" I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "I'm not mad, Noah, but sometimes grown-ups forget what's important, and they have to learn all over again." He nodded, taking this in with the wisdom only an 8-year-old can carry with such purity. "Grandma," he said solemnly, "you can teach us. You're really good at teaching." The simplicity of his faith nearly broke me. I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, I will." I took his hand and led him inside. He gazed around the mansion with eyes like saucers. "Is all this yours?" he whispered. "Yes, Noah," I said gently. And someday, part of it might be yours. He grinned, but not with greed. With wonder. Grandma, you're like a superhero. I laughed softly. Maybe a quiet one. He squeezed my hand. The best kind. As we walked through the great room together, I realized something profound. Revenge may open the door. But redemption is what walks through it. And for the first time in many years, my family's story felt like it was shifting towards something new. Something possible. Something worth rebuilding. Over the next 3 months, life at the mansion settled into a rhythm I hadn't known since before Robert died, a rhythm of purpose, clarity, and above all, peace. Noah visited every weekend without fail. The first time he came, he walked through the mansion in awestruck silence, his small sneakers tapping lightly on the marble floors. He paused in each room, touching the velvet drapes, tracing the patterns on the carved railings, staring at the ocean through the wall of glass. "Grandma," he whispered, "is all this really yours?" "Yes, sweetheart, every part of it." His eyes sparkled. "You must have been a superhero my whole life. And I didn't even know." I laughed. "Maybe, but superheroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear old dresses and clip coupons." Noah nodded thoughtfully, absorbing every word. "But why didn't you tell anyone?" I crouched down to meet his eyes. "Because I needed to know who loved me with their heart, not for what I own." He considered this for a long moment, then asked with a child's perfect simplicity. "So now you know?" "Yes," I said softly, "now I know for sure." David kept his promise. He called me every day, not to ask for favors, not to apologize again and again, but simply to talk. About life, about work, about how he wanted to do better for his family. And for himself. He never came with Vanessa those first few weeks. He said he needed to rebuild his relationship with me without noise. Without influence. One Tuesday afternoon, he sat in the mansion's library, his favorite room. The one filled with the books I'd collected over decades but never had space to display. He looked around with a smile both proud and sad. "I went my whole life thinking you didn't have anything," he said. "I honestly believed you were living paycheck to paycheck." I raised an eyebrow. "And did that belief make you treat me better? Or worse?" He winced. "Worse, much worse. And that's what I'm trying to understand about myself." He swallowed hard. "I stopped seeing you as a person, Mom. I only saw the role. The obligation. I forgot you had dreams. A past. A personality outside of being my mother." "And now?" I asked. "Now I want to get to know that other person. Eleanor Brooks. The investor. The philanthropist. The woman who built all this and never bragged once." I softened. David had always been capable of goodness, he'd just forgotten how to access it. "Your father believed in me," I said quietly, "enough to trust me with everything he built. And you honored that trust," he said, glancing around the magnificent room. "More than anyone could have imagined." We talked for hours, not the strained, obligatory conversations of the past, but real ones, honest ones. For the first time in years, I saw glimpses of the boy I'd raised, the one with big dreams and a tender heart. There was still hope. Vanessa's transformation came slower. Not because she didn't care, but because change is sometimes a battle against the version of ourselves we never wanted to admit existed. At first, her messages were awkward, swinging clumsily between apology and justification. I know I shouldn't have said those things. But sometimes I didn't realize how they sounded. I wasn't trying to exclude you. It just happened. I don't know why I cared so much about appearances. I responded politely, but I didn't sugarcoat anything. Finally, she took a different approach. "Eleanor," she said during her first visit back to the mansion in February. Voice trembling, "My therapist says insecurity is like a leak. You don't see it at first, but eventually it damages everything around you." I poured tea, watching her carefully. "And who did your insecurity damage most?" I asked. She swallowed. "You, and Noah." The honesty in that moment felt real, not rehearsed, not defensive. "Eleanor," she continued, "I don't expect to be forgiven anytime soon. But I'm trying to understand why I acted the way I did. Why I needed everyone to see me as perfect. Even if it meant tearing others down. That's something only you can fix. Vanessa, I said, but recognizing the harm is the first real step. I want to earn your respect. She whispered, not because of your money, but because I failed you. Because Noah deserves better than the woman I was. Her voice cracked. I never want him to repeat my mistakes. For the first time, I let myself believe she might truly change. Not for appearances, but for growth. The most beautiful transformation came from Noah. Children have a way of understanding truths adults complicate. One warm afternoon, we walked along the private beach collecting seashells. He bent down to pick up a smooth, pink one, turning it in his small hands. Grandma, he said, now I understand why you always tell me to be nice to everyone at school. Even the kids who don't have the cool shoes. I smiled. And why is that, sweetheart? He looked up at me with earnest brown eyes. Because we don't know who they really are on the inside. They might be kind, or special, or superheroes hiding in plain sight. I laughed softly. That's right. He tucked the shell into his pocket. You looked like a normal grandma, he said, but you were actually amazing the whole time. My throat tightened. And that, I told him, is why you must always treat people with kindness. Everyone deserves respect, even when you think they have nothing to give you. He nodded seriously, as if sealing the lesson inside himself. I had never been prouder. My story spread far beyond our family. Linda, my old friend who ran a charity organization, shared it among women's groups across the country. Messages began pouring in from older women who had been overlooked, dismissed, or pushed aside by their families. One letter, handwritten in delicate script, stayed with me. Dear Eleanor, your story gave me the courage to finally tell my children about the business I built after my husband passed. For 20 years, I hid it to avoid jealousy and judgment. I thought no one would care. But you helped me claim my voice again. Thank you. Marlene, age 74. I read it twice, then placed it gently in a drawer of keepsakes. Because this was bigger than revenge. This was resonance. In March, David and Vanessa came for dinner, our first true family dinner since everything changed. No tension. No condescension. No subtle digs. Just conversation. Real conversation. At one point, David took my hand across the table. Mom, he said softly, you didn't just teach us about respect, you taught us it's never too late to change. Vanessa nodded, eyes glistening. You taught us to be better people. She added quietly, for Noah, for you, for ourselves. I looked at them, my son, my daughter-in-law, and for the first time in many years. I didn't see disappointment. I saw possibility. I saw repair. I saw a second chance. And in the living room, little Noah stacked wooden blocks into a tall, wobbly tower. Grandma, he shouted proudly. Look, it's like your mansion. I laughed. And do you know how it stands, sweetheart? He shook his head. With care, I said, with patience, and by fixing it every time it leans. He nodded as if absorbing wisdom far beyond his years. Just like us? I touched his cheek gently. Yes, Noah, exactly like us. By late spring, the mansion had become more than a symbol of the life I'd rebuilt, it became a place of transformation. Not just for me, but for the entire family. The ocean breeze that once felt like a reminder of solitude now carried the promise of new beginnings. One morning in April, I sat at the mahogany desk inside the mansion's office, reviewing the final draft of a project that had been quietly growing in my heart. It was a charity fund, one dedicated to helping older adults who had been dismissed or diminished by their families. The same way I had been. The name came to me instantly, almost effortlessly. The Dignity and Respect Foundation. A fund for every grandmother who'd been pushed aside. For every grandfather whose wisdom had been ignored. For every elder whose presence was treated like an inconvenience instead of a gift. With Tom Whitman's guidance, the plans were nearly ready to launch. As I reviewed the documents, my phone buzzed. It was a picture from Noah, a photo of the small seashell he'd found during our walk on the private beach. Grandma, look, I put it on my desk so I always remember to be kind. Noah. I smiled, feeling warmth bloom in my chest. If nothing else, the lesson had reached the person who mattered most. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find David there, standing with the same sincere humility he had shown over the past months. Mom, he said gently, I brought lunch, thought maybe we could eat together. I stepped aside. Come in, David, I'd like that. We set the meal out on the veranda, the sun warming our shoulders as waves shimmered in the distance. He looked better, lighter, as if shedding the weight of who he had been. As we ate, he glanced toward the office. You're working on something, he said, something big. I studied him, seeing the man he was becoming. Yes, I said, I'm building a foundation, one that helps families reconnect, and reminds people that dignity shouldn't fade with age. David looked deeply moved. Mom, you're turning everything that hurt you into something that helps others. That's the only kind of transformation that lasts, I replied. He nodded slowly, understanding. You know, he said, Noah told his teacher that you're his hero. I felt my breath catch. Did he really? Oh yes, David said, smiling. He said you're the strongest person he knows. And honestly, I can't argue with that. It struck me then, how quietly life can change. How slowly redemption can weave itself back into a broken family. Not through grand apologies or dramatic gestures, but through small, consistent acts of sincerity. Vanessa's journey was slower, but real. She visited every couple of weeks. Sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit quietly by the water. The first time she came without crying, she told me something that surprised us both. Eleanor, she said, twisting her wedding ring nervously. My therapist asked me to name one person in my life I truly want to be better for. And I said your name. She laughed softly through her embarrassment. It shocked me, it shocked her, but it's the truth. You're the one person I wronged most deeply, and the one example I want to learn from. I didn't answer immediately. She wasn't asking for absolution, she was asking for direction. You're trying, I finally said, that matters. She nodded, tears glistening but not falling this time. I want to rebuild this family with you. With David. For Noah, I want him to grow up knowing we learned our lesson. Then keep doing the work. I said gently, consistency will speak louder than remorse. And she did. Not perfectly. Not instantly. But genuinely. In early June, we held a small family dinner at the mansion, the first time all 3 generations sat at one table with ease instead of tension. Noah ran around excitedly, showing off the seashell he wore on a leather string around his neck. It's my reminder necklace, he explained proudly, so I never forget to be kind. Grandma says kindness is a superpower. David smiled at him, then at me. Mom, this house used to intimidate me. Now it feels like home. I looked at my family, flawed, humbled, rebuilding. Maybe homes aren't built from walls and beams. Maybe they're built from honesty, repair, accountability. As dinner ended, we stepped outside to the veranda. The sky glowed with hues of lavender and gold as the sun sank below the horizon. Grandma, Noah whispered, resting his head on my arm. Are you happy now? I wrapped an arm around him. Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy because we finally understand each other. He grinned. And you're gonna live here forever, right? I chuckled. I'll live here for as long as life allows. But someday, when you're older and kind and wise, part of this will be yours. His eyes widened with wonder. But not greed, not the hunger adults sometimes show. Because I'm respectful, he said proudly, and I treat people like they matter. That's exactly why, I whispered. Later that night, after they left, I stood alone on the veranda, looking out across the ocean. The wind brushed my hair. The moon shimmered across the waves. And I thought about the journey, from the phone call that shattered me on Christmas Eve, to the silent revenge that reshaped everything, to the family learning to rebuild itself from the inside out. What I learned was simple, but profound. True revenge isn't destruction. Its transformation. Its dignity reclaimed. It's living so radiantly that your life becomes the mirror others must face. I didn't ruin David and Vanessa. I didn't need to. They ruined their own image of who they thought I was. And then they rebuilt a new one, with honesty, humility, and a willingness to grow. I reclaimed my dignity. I rediscovered my identity. And I built a future rooted not in bitterness, but in self-respect. The waves rolled onto the private shore, steady and eternal. At 70 years old, I had rewritten my life, quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. And as the moonlight danced across the water, I whispered a truth I wished every woman could carry. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you build, demand, and embody. Tonight, I slept deeply, wrapped not in wealth or status, but in the peace that comes from finally being seen, heard, and valued. Not as a burden. Not as an afterthought. But as Eleanor Brooks. A woman who rose in silence. And transformed everything.